Hello, I'm Niall, a developer advocate with Camunda, and today I'm going to talk to you about BPMN modeling patterns. Now, we've already discussed the various symbols we can use in BPMN and also some of the advanced symbols, but the more important thing often after you've moved on from understanding the very basic symbols is understanding how combining them in common ways can help you solve the most common problems you're going to find. A lot of processes have very, very similar patterns, and the ways of solving those problems in BPMN modeling have been solved usually, and there's some really good best practices around modeling the situational patterns. So this is part one of the video. So let's talk about what we're going to show. In this video, we're going to discuss escalating a situation. This is really common in processes where things are going relatively smoothly, but then suddenly we hit some kind of roadblock. Now, rather than the process being completely useless now, we want to escalate this, meaning that we want to try and force the process to continue by maybe involving people or systems in order to correct issues. We'll also then talk about something that I don't think gets enough credit, which is measuring KPIs. Now, that is done frequently after modeling. Makes sense, but I want to talk about the benefits of why it's useful to actually think about KPI measurement during process design and some of the benefits that you might have. Now, later on, I'll be posting a second video, and that video will deal with dealing with fatal problems and also reusable processes and second set of eyes principles, like 4 eyes principle, and just getting the idea around involving multiple stakeholders in terms of a certain process. So for today, very, very simple. We're going to use the Camunda's desktop modeler. A link to the download is right below. Something that's quite specific about what the version I'll be using is that it has a really, really cool addition, which is it has the token simulator plugin. The link to that is also in the description below. So when you see tokens floating around the place, you will know that it's because I've added this plugin, and you can too, just follow the instructions. Okay, so let's get started. So here we are inside the Camunda modeler. We're going to build a Camunda 7 diagram just because we're building a process here for documentation, essentially. So we're not thinking about execution just yet. The Camunda 8 version of the modeler here would enforce certain symbols that have executional parameters only. So we're not going to limit ourselves to that. So let's click here on the Camunda 7 BPMN diagram. Okay, so here we have the modeler. So we're going to do a simple process that that gives me incredible anxiety, which is trying to get a bill at a restaurant. So we want to get meal bill, and by the end of this process, we would quite like to have the meal is paid for. This seems like a pretty straightforward process, right? So the first thing we do is we have a task, and it's going to be something like ask for bill. It's a user task, right? And then we're going to have a message event where we wait for the bill to arrive at the table. When it arrives, we pay for it. Okay, so let's say pay bill. Great, and we are in good shape. So how does the token simulation say this works? Pretty straightforward. We ask for the bill, we wait here for a while until the bill arrives, and then when the bill does arrive, we pay it, the process ends. Marvelous. So the nice thing about this is that it's very simple. The sad thing is that this has a fundamental flaw, which is the bit, of course, of this process that tends to give me a bit of anxiety is that bit where we're sitting there, we've already sort of paid, we're already eaten everything, and we just want to leave and the bill is not arriving. So in this process, we wait forever until the bill comes, but we want to do an escalation. If we're waiting too long, we would quite like to remind people about that. So let's add a gateway right here. In this case, there are two possibilities. Either the bill arrives or we've waited too long, which is a pretty clear indication that we need an event-based gateway. So in that case, I'll add a timer event right here, and it's going to be wait. Let's see. It's hard to know exactly how long to wait. Let's just say an amount of time. Great. And once that happens, we will go up to the counter and remind about the bill again. Go to counter and remind staff about bill. So after that happens, we then go back to waiting. So let's take a look at that. So that's another event-based gateway. And in this case, we will either get our bill back, bill arrives, or we would have to wait a little longer, and let's just see what we can do and move this across, because if the bill does arrive, we want to link back up with the main process, pay the bill. If we were waiting longer, then we will storm out of the restaurant. Maybe that's called that an edge case, but it's possible. Okay, and this is a user task, and this is a user task. So let's take a look at our lovely process, which is the first iteration of what we're trying to do here. And you can see it basically does what we want. Okay, so if we ask for the bill, we will arrive here. In this case, we wait a certain amount of time, and we go down here, and we've asked for our bill to arrive, and it comes here, and we're now waiting again. And of course, it's possible the bill does arrive. It's also possible to wait too long. We go this way, and we storm out the restaurant, and everyone's angry. Okay, so that takes care of some things. There are some problems with this model. The first one is maybe not very clear, but it's to do with how the BPMN standard works. So if I play that model again, and I arrive here, and at this point in BPMN, we are waiting for a message to come in, and we're also waiting for a timer. The problem is that if I go here and go up to the counter and ask for the bill, I'm no longer waiting for the message to arrive. It's actually one of those weird things about BPMN messages, which is as long as the process is no longer waiting for it, the bill will fill. So they'll arrive at the table, no one's going to be there, and they'll leave again. That's because we're not ready to receive the message. So that's going to be a problem. It's also a lot of duplication, you can probably see. Like we have this thing here and the same construct right over here. So while this does solve the problem, it's not the best pattern to use. So let's think about another pattern to use to make this work. So let's start by solving the problem of duplication. So that's quite easy, luckily enough. So I'm going to remove this stuff because this is a duplicate, so bye-bye. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a simple thing where if we ask for bill at the counter, we're going to go back over here to the gateway. I'm going to go back to waiting. That's pretty nice. It's pretty simple. Let's remove this. So then we have our process now has the ability to ask for the bill. If the amount of time passes, we go to the counter, we then spin back around and then wait again. And we can wait for as many times as we need to. But again, we still, then the bill arrives and we get paid for it. Marvelous. But while this removes a certain amount of thing, it doesn't actually solve all of the logic that we need to solve, because we still have this lovely storm out of restaurant thing that we should probably implement. So instead, we just need to move some stuff around, because I would love to be able to storm out of a restaurant. I haven't done it before, but I feel like I should, although, yeah, maybe it's a little bit impolite. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm basically going to say, if we have waited too many times, let's say yes, and this is, let's say, a default flow. Now we get to storm out of the restaurant. So in this case, we ask for our bill, we arrive here, it doesn't come, but we're going around this way. We continue. Let's remove the pause here. Now let's switch the gateways. Now we've waited already once before, so now we're just going to go up here and storm out. Not bad, not bad. But we still have this, the one little problem. We've removed the duplication, but we don't yet have the full usefulness of the fact that this, if we're waiting here, we could still get the bill and we're not at the table, which is not good. So let's solve that next. So what are we trying to do here with this new model? Well, we actually want to ensure that we are always waiting for the bill in case somebody swings by while we're up at the counter. Okay, so let's begin. The thing I'm going to do is slightly controversial. It might make no sense. Is I'm going to remove a whole bunch of symbols, including the event-based gateway, this timer. Just get rid of this XOR gateway, and let's just storm out of the restaurant. We'll dump that over there for now. So an important aspect that we're going to change is actually this symbol here, the waiting. Now, right now it's an event, but there's also the ability in BPMN to wait as part of a task, and that is actually fundamental here. So if I delete this and I add instead a receive task called wait for bill, functionally that's the same. There's no real difference. But from a construction perspective, I now have the ability to add boundary events. Now, what does that mean? If the bill arrives, I will go here. I can add a non-interrupting timer event to this. And that is a key difference to the previous version we had, because here, if we wait reasonable time, if we waited too long, we go here, we ask the counter people for stuff, and then we end the process. So how does that fundamentally change things? Well, if we turn on token simulation, you'll see that we ask for the bill, we arrive here. Now, there are two possibilities right now. The first is that the bill gets received, we pay the bill, everything's great. The second thing is really cool. If I click this, okay, I'll put a little wait state here, I will create a new token that will actually go down here, and now we're doing things in parallel. So now while I go to the counter, I also have somebody waiting for me on the table in case the bill arrives while I'm at the counter. So then maybe the bill arrives, great, we pay the bill, and then I get back from the counter, all as well. Or maybe I go to the counter, but then I have to go back. No problem, I can do that. So this is really, really nice. And the next thing I want to do is, of course, add my storming out. And that can happen by adding another boundary event. So this can be an interrupting timer event. So this is where we wait too long. And if we wait too long, then we're just going to stop waiting for the bill and just storm out of the restaurant. And the way that works is we ask for the bill, we arrive here, we now have three possibilities. We have the go to the counter, we have get the bill, and we can also just say, you know what, we're out of here, and then we storm out of the restaurant. Okay, and this is a pretty good way to deal with escalation. We have our single point where we're waiting, we have two events that can deal with different things. So what's next? So another process very near and dear to my heart involves games, specifically tabletop role-playing games, in which I will be a storyteller who would like to offer my party some kind of fun adventure that I have mild control over. For instance, in this case, they might decide what to do when they enter a tavern. Maybe they want to just chat with some bar patrons, great stuff, then they leave town, that's the end of that. They also might want to steal some things, fine, go to town, and they can steal some things, then leave town. Or they might, be a little more aggressive and get into a fight, and in which case they might, I don't know, enter combat, and then potentially they might end up dying. It kind of depends on what dice rolls happen. Now, as a very good game master, I would like to make sure that I understand how much time and how much fun they are having doing these fun adventure things. And for that, we'll need to do some kind of reporting. Now, in this particular video, section of the video, I want to talk about the difference between modeling something where it's functional to modeling something where you plan to try and get some information out of it. Right now, if we look at this model, every single symbol has a value to it executionally and part of the process. There's no superfluous stuff here at all, which is why, generally speaking, when people see, let's say, this alternative here, which is very similar with with just an added group of milestones here, they may think, well, why bother? These things have no implication for execution. They don't have an execution semantics. They have no implication for how the process will actually proceed, because these milestones are just milestones. They just announce a state has been reached. So people often, especially in BPMN, ignore these when modeling, forgetting that later on we actually might need these in order to keep our process improving. because in modeling BPMN, you need to remember most of the time when you model a process is going to be executed. And that means that you now have multiple stakeholders. The people who are making the model executable would probably do something like this, because everything they need is present, but also everything they've added is theirs, so they might remove it or change it. Now let's imagine you're the person who, let's say, wants to maintain this process and keep it improving. Why would this benefit you? Well, these are symbols that you as a designer own. There's no execution semantics, so that means that the developer or the DevOps person or whoever it is who's building the executable version of this model doesn't ever need to touch those. In fact, it's even quite useful for them for maintenance to understand where to put future symbols. And I'm going to demonstrate this by showing you some reporting and showing you how that can work to your benefit having these symbols. So to demonstrate the value, I'm going to use this example in Optimize. The tooling doesn't really matter because the principles are always the same, but basically I'm going to show you some of the benefits of actually thinking about about reporting during the time of modeling. And so now we've executed the process a couple of times, it doesn't really matter too many. I'm just going to select a heat map here. So this is going to show us, this is a nice overview of what's going on. And this is usually pretty good from first start. But if you really are interested in reporting, milestones are incredibly helpful in order to work out things like which routes we take, how often we get places. So for instance, being able to, let's say, do a report based on where exactly we've been. So if I do a heat map and I do maybe a bar chart, we have a whole bunch of different things. We have leave town here. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that these are all tasks that need to be accomplished, right? These aren't definitions of state necessarily. Because of the way BPMN works, what we have here is a gateway, which probably isn't too relevant. We have a few things that aren't executable, but we now need to hope that our KPIs fit into what is modeled directly, which might sometimes work, but we're always compromising based on that. And more importantly, what if the next version of the model removes chat with patron, for instance? Well, they're not going to realize that you are using that as an important task for KPIs, and you might actually break everything. So let's look at the alternative. So now we have the other model that has milestones in it. And let's again create a report for this as well. And it starts off pretty similar. There are some big differences though. For instance, now when we go and build a report, we know what we're looking for already. We don't need to look at this model and try to work out the state, because if we have added it, it's already there. We know when we have stolen a drink, we know when we've left the tavern. None of these require us to have to interrogate the model to work out when and how things happen. So that makes the reporting really easily. So if I want to report on all the state, now imagine you were just given this model and you're being told, like let's say you didn't even model it, report on the various important states. Well, if you have a definitive best practice of always adding milestones like these wherever the business finds it as an important step, then you could be given any model and you could just know, okay, I'll create a report on the important states. So I can maybe do a bar chart like we did before. So let's do bar chart. But obviously these are a whole bunch of stuff like we saw before, but now we can actually go in and say, okay, well, now let's pick just the important states we care about. So we can go in and say, we just want this, 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 and this, for instance, and say apply filter. Now what we have is a report that makes more sense. It's abstracted from the entire process model and it's designed from the beginning to relate to KPIs that we care about. And also, you don't need necessarily to have somebody to have to fully understand the process from end to end, but rather just be able to match these milestones. As well as that, the final thing is about maintenance. Maintenance is really important. You own these milestones. What I mean by that is the developer has no reason to or need to change any of those. So if you've added them initially, they stay there and you don't need to worry about next versions of the process, for instance, randomly remove them or refactor, changing the naming or anything like that, because these are specifically designed for reporting, rather than in the previous edition where we were trying to report on existing already functional aspects of the model. So I would always suggest in design time, think about the reporting and add milestones where you feel as a business KPIs are a good indicator. You can also do timing between them and a bunch of other reporting as well.